Welcome to TORAH Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with episode number 8 of Hebrew for Fun and Profit with Gavriel Sanders, coming to you from his hometown to teach us all a little bit of Hebrew. And just, I don't know that many people have noticed it or have followed along with it, but the play on words that you chose for this is actually quite clever. So prophet, P-R-O-P-H-E-T.
Yes.
I'm wondering how many people, since I didn't call attention to it, how many people actually think it might be a typo on my part.
No. You never make any typos. I've noticed that.
Yeah, right. Oh, you mean I haven't really so far?
Faux pas maybe, but never typos.
Okay, good. Well, awesome. Well, it's good to have you back in the studio. It's been a little bit of a break, and
Yes.
I know not just me, but everybody else is excited to have you back. So without further ado, I will button up and follow along with whatever I can, ask a few questions along the way like usual.
Good. Please do. It's a free-flowing approach, and I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking time.
Wonderful.
I am Gavriel R.E.A. Sanders. It hasn't always been that way, but that's a story on a YouTube video someplace else. This is your Hebrew language learning magazine. As we've gotten into this process, as the Canadians say, process. I realized that to just try to teach you a bunch of phrases or grammatical elements, it's going too narrow. I really prefer, with William's consent, to have a little wider approach and kind of direct people through the magazine approach to be able to figure out where your level is, where you fit in, and what the resources are that are appropriate for you. Because unlike my day 40 years ago when I started learning Hebrew just out of Bible college, today the resources are endless, vast, almost overwhelming. And since I teach Hebrew at the high school level here at a local Jewish high school, to one of the girls' academies, and then I write about it in one of the local newspapers in my column, I'm constantly reviewing and researching and experimenting with different resources that are out there, trying to find things that especially help American Jewish students who may have grown up in a very observant environment, use Hebrew in prayer and study of Torah, etc., Tanakh, other Jewish sources, the Siddur, but to bring the language itself to being as much at home on the lips so that then it'll migrate into the heart. I guess my really simple philosophy on all this is that the more Hebrew we can activate on a person's lips, the more dynamic, viable, and relevant it will be in that person's heart. Otherwise, it could be sort of like somebody, I know when I was in Bible college many years ago, that other side of my life, and I studied what's known as Koine or Kini Greek, and I just had no relationship with it. It was very two-dimensional. It had height and it had width, but it had no depth to it. And I had an introduction to Hebrew course with old Dr. Charles Walcom back in the days. He's no longer with us, and it was also, he tried to be entertaining, but there was no relevance to it. But today, Hebrew as a living language is relevant to every single one of us. There's just no reason why anybody who has even a modicum of interest shouldn't be able to tap into it and find something that can enlighten and elevate your spiritual experience. You know, whether you're still in the church somewhere trying to figure out what that's all about, or you've come out and you're now trying to figure out that side of your life, or like me, you've gone 180 degrees and not only left the church, but come deeply into the Jewish community. Just 2 days before Hanukkah, a few days ago, I turned 17 as a Jew. So
nice.
now I'm as old as my senior students in the 12th grade. So,
That's
but
awesome.
I look just a little bit older, you know. So, so with that in mind, I wanted to kind of mention to you that today's date is a somewhat significant one in the Jewish calendar. It's one of the minor fast days in the Jewish year. And I don't know if you knew this, but most people, when they think of fasting and the Jewish calendar, what's the first thing that always comes to mind?
Fasting the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur is the only thing that comes to my mind.
And you anticipated the next little appearance of the words right there in blue. Is that coming through, by the way, okay, on your screen?
Oh, you know
Yom
what?
Kippur?
I've been so delighted in looking at your smiling face. I don't have the right screen up. Now it's up.
Okay.
And we're good to go. Yes, I see that now.
All right, so I'm going to go back over to here. So
I'm sorry
today
about that.
is known as the 10th of Tevet. It's
Got it.
from the month of Nisan, which happens. It's not a car dealer, by the way, a car manufacturer. The month of Nisan, which is when the month of the first month of the year is known as. See, there are actually 4 New Years in the Jewish. The way it's structured, we have the New Year for the trees, and we have the New Year for documents, and then there's a New Year for like the Rosh Hashanah, et cetera, and then there's another one. So the 10th of Tevet is the 10th day of the 10th month coming from Nisan, which is in the springtime. And it's one of several minor fast days. Of course, as I said to you, the fast that's the best known for everybody is Yom Kippur, which occurs in the fall, and it's about a 27-hour fast. Then right after Rosh Hashanah, before Yom Kippur, immediately after Rosh Hashanah, which is a 2-day holiday, both in Israel and outside of Israel, we have something called Tzom Gedalia, which commemorates the fall or the assassination of one named Gedalia. You can go to My Jewish Learning or a number of other sites, aish.com, very rich, content-rich site to find information about these things. Then there's the today, Asara B'Tevet, and there are really 3 things associated with Asara B'Tevet. It was like the 8th, 9th, and 10th. The different event, a calamitous event associated with each one. The 10th of Tevet, we'll look at a pasuk, or a passage of scripture in just a moment, from the book of Kings, 2 Kings, was the siege of the city of Jerusalem 2,500 years ago under Nebuchadnezzar. But also this time is associated with the commissioning of the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Jewish scriptures, to be done. And by the way, I'm going to mention that for just a moment. I didn't mean to do this, but it really is relevant. I was corresponding. It's interesting. I have a proxy correspondence with a Messianic Jew going on through a friend of mine. So I provide him with all the data, and he puts it out in his own name. But I'm doing all the research behind the scenes to speak to this fellow who's been involved in the Messianic movement. He grew up as kind of a Jew for nothing. He went through the Reform movement, had a Reform bar mitzvah, and his whole concept of Judaism is sort of flash frozen when he was 13 years old, and it was a very thin experience of Judaism at any rate. So what he's found in Christianity, i.e. Messianic Judaism, seems to be much more dynamic, and I would agree with that. It's much more lively, and for him it's much more meaningful. He claims to be more Jewish today than he was before, and I would actually agree with that. He's much more involved in things Jewish. Nice. from the Bible, but he's still very much your typical kind of Messianic Jew. And he was using arguments from the Septuagint, for example, Ha'alma, Isaiah 7:14, things that we've heard Rabbi Singer talk about and Rabbi Skobac talk about quite a bit. The whole idea of Psalm 2, verse 12, which said Nashkuvar, which they interpret as kiss the Son. And we went back and forth on the issue of that the Septuagint, only that what was commissioned by Ptolemy for the rabbis to author was a translation only of the Torah, and that's been said many times, but it's worth repeating again. I did a lot of research on this subject, and it's quite fascinating to discover that even Christian authorities, like Zondervan, for example, Zondervan Publishing House, in the introduction to their version of the Septuagint, will tell you very clearly that the language, the quality of the language of the Torah, the Pentateuch, is very high, but the rest of the writings and the prophets are very weak, particularly, by the way, the book of Isaiah. So I thought that's interesting. No, but this fast that we have today, the 10th of Tevet, also commemorates that publication as well. It wasn't necessarily a positive thing for that to happen. And the third thing is, of course, the birth of Jesus, which is historically and in Jewish history has been tied to this time period, the 8th, 9th, and 10th of Tevet. So it's more than I wanted to say, and that's how you know I'm a teacher. You ask a question, and they tell you more than you wanted to know. Okay?
There you go.
There's also in the spring, around right before Purim, there's the Ta'anit, which is the Hebrew word for fast. We also use the word tzom. One of the tractates of the Talmud is called Ta'anit or Tainus. So we have a fast associated with Esther, which was, of course, 3 days and 3 nights. We do 1 day. And then there's another in the summer at the beginning of the period, the ominous period known as the 3 weeks, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, which is the 17th of the month of Tammuz. And that leads up to then Tisha B'Av, the 9th of the month of Av. So these are the various fasts, most of the minor fasts. The reason I put the 2 in blue there is because Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av are the ones that are really 24, really more like 26-hour fast, 26, 27, depending on where you are in relation to the length of the day of the daytime. Because we follow what are known as halachic, or kind of Jewish timed hours, and that hour varies from less than 60 minutes to more than 60 minutes. But here's the passage that relates to Tisha B'Av from the scriptures, 2 Kings, chapter 25, verses 1 and 2, speaking about Zedekiah, that he rebelled against the king of Babylon, and in the 9th year of his reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, which is today, Nebuchadnezzar moved against Jerusalem with his whole army. He besieged it, and they built towers around it, all around. The city continued in a state of siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. So that's what this significance is of this particular day. I'm going to switch gears now, and I'm going to give you some recommendations. So for those of you that want to really enrich your experience both in English and in Hebrew, then here are some things that you can do. You can. There's a book on the left by a wonderful researching scholarly pulpit rabbi, Rabbi Blech, The Secrets of the Hebrew Words. It's not an easy book to find, but you might find it on Amazon. Well worth getting. And on the right is a classic from Art Scroll called The Wisdom in the Hebrew Alphabet. It's a must-have because the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, according to the Gemara, according to the Talmud, the letters of the Hebrew alphabet are really the subatomic particles that when Hashem created the world, he created the world using the Hebrew letters. And there is a lot of study and information on this. Unfortunately, some of the best stuff is only available in Hebrew, but from people like Rabbi Zamir Cohen and some others. But it's slowly finding its way into English. So I wanted to mention these 2 resources to you. And there's another that I'd like to switch gears on. I'm going to talk about something called Project Eser, Project 10. You see it in Hebrew there, and then I've transliterated it for you. You cannot learn Hebrew meaningfully from a book. Now, I'll make an exception. There are a few rare, gifted, linguistically oriented, what we call polyglots, people that are good at other languages, that can do that. They have there's a Yiddish word, Sitzfleisch, which basically means, it's a funny word, it means sitting flesh. They have enough flesh on their bones to be able to endure sitting for a while to go through that process of learning it. Most people today, especially in an internet era with a YouTube kind of 10-minute mentality, Khan Academy kind of a mentality, don't have much more time to do that. So one of the projects I embarked on with my high school students this academic year was Project Eser. And Project Eser is ear training. Just training your ears through 10 minutes a day of passive listening. So let's talk about passive versus active language learning. Language is not static, it is dynamic, and there are passive parts to it and there are active parts to it. Right now you're listening to me, that's passive. I'm actively talking. You are actively listening, but it's really a passive process. You're not doing anything, you're just listening. Reading also could be said to be in more of a passive mode versus writing, where you're actually, taking the words from your head and out they're going out through your hand, through whatever you're typing or writing. And in the same way that then talking is you're generating words from thought, as opposed to taking them in through the ear gate or through the eye gate, which is more the receptor mode. So as opposed to the broadcaster mode. That's the difference between active and passive. So you have to engage in both of those in any language that you're learning. Things that we're talking about here today are really general principles of language acquisition that could work in whether it's Spanish or whatever. I'm still working on my Spanish, and my goal is and I'm pretty close to it, is to master like 1,000 words or so. And where I work, I happen to have a number of Latinos on the staff, so it's great to interact with them every day. But also I work with the book, et cetera, to pick up concepts. And then listening, in the car, I can turn on, we have a number of Spanish radio stations here in New York, some of them very sophisticated, others more Tejano, kind of northern, whatever kind of border music, Frontera. And I listened in order to tune my ear, because otherwise it's a jumble. And that's one of the things you have to do, is to just listen. Now, what I've put in on the screen in front of you is something that's available both in the Google Play and at the App Store for Apple. I certainly have it on my iPhone. Let me just kind of pull it up here and show you what it looks like on the phone itself. Here it is. It's in this category here. Okay. There we go. So I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, hold it still just for a second. It just switched. See if that's what you wanted to show me.
Yeah, this is it.
Okay, so, hold it a little higher. Right about there. Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. So you go to the App Store. What you do is you can go, and you're going to need to. Hello there. How did I do that? You'll need to put in these two Hebrew words, Kol Yisrael, which is voice of Israel, basically. Kol Yisrael. There's another word in Hebrew, kol. It means all, but that's spelled with a kaf. This is with a kuf. Kol Yisrael, which means voice of Israel. And even if you just put in kuf vav lamed, it'll probably pop up at the top of the list. And what I'm going to spend a couple minutes with this to give you some orientation to it, and you can come back to this video if you need to reference it. So just kind of reference where you are time-wise, and then you can just zip right back to this particular spot.
Nice.
There are 9 radio stations here. There is, down at the bottom, you can see in the middle Reshit Aleph, where my cursor is. Then there's Reshit Beit. These are just different. They're like, just different radio stations on the. There's dozens of actually stations in Israel, but these are some of the primary ones. This one down here is Kol Yisrael in Arabic, which I used to speak pretty good Arabic, but I don't live in Arabic-speaking lands anymore. So, but the 3 that I principally focus on are Reshit Aleph, Reshit Beit, and this one in the middle, Moreshet. Moreshet means like heritage. And this is programming, a lot of Torah programming, fabulous music. Each one of these stations has archives, programming archives, and you can access those programming archives. Now, there's not English on this. Now, this one over here, by the way, Reka, is more kind of general world pop and rock and so forth. I really don't spend any time in that one. This one down here with what looks like the broadcasting antenna is that every hour they put a summary of the news. So one of the things that you could do, and it's like 6-7 minutes maybe at the top of each hour, and they're archived there through the day. So if you wanted to just listen to something that's straight talking, like the news, and see what does that feel like to listen to that, that's a great place to go, to the spot right here. If you want to listen to a mixed program, there's interviews and commercials. We might dip into that area. I've been using this with some of my high school students, where we'll take 2 or 3 Israeli commercials from the radio, and we'll pick them apart, and we'll ask, we'll look for the persuasive elements as well, looking for what's known as sociolinguistic components that go along with this. That's a lot of fun. And then, as I said here, sorry about just have a little tickle in the nose here. Winter. This Moreshet has fabulous programming and fabulous music archives. You can get 45 minutes of uninterrupted music in different categories. There's music before Shabbat, so you can kind of set up Friday afternoon to create a mood. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource, and it's free. I actually wrote to the programmers asking them for this screenshot, and they were delighted to hear that people, more and more people in North America are listening. So that's awesome. This is Project Esser, and again, the reason for doing this, you say, well, I won't understand what they're talking about, or they're speaking so fast. Well, let me tell you what happens. You've already mastered your mother tongue, and you did it in a way that was unconscious. You didn't know you were learning it. We were bombarded with it day and night, and they said to you, you want water? Yeah. You want a lolly? And you learn to mimic. And so if you're a listener of the program and you're under 20 years old today, you're very fortunate, because you still have an active, what's known as language acquisition device in your head, the LAD. Children who are 3, 4, 5, 6 years old can literally sort out 4 or 5 languages without sitting down and opening a book or being taught a list or looking at any grammar or nothing. They just hear it and they absorb it.
Wow.
It's been well documented, well studied, through the decades, really. Back when I took linguistics in graduate school, we talked a lot about the difference between adult language acquisition and child acquisition. So adults really have to work at it more. Now, what's the easiest way for you to learn Hebrew? Be in a Hebrew-speaking environment.
Right.
There's no question.
Full immersion.
So either you move to Israel, or you come to New York, or you go to Los Angeles. You can find a lot of it in Florida as well, and there's a growing Israeli community in Dallas and other parts of the country. But LA and New York are the really big places. So I speak Hebrew, interact in Hebrew all the time here. It's wonderful to be able to do that.
A friend of mine said the same thing. Full immersion, he said, was like the best you could have. In fact, he recommended for me to download an Israeli radio station and just listen to it as long as I can tolerate it, like day after day, because after a while you start becoming familiar with certain phrases or words. And he said when he went to school in Israel to study electrical engineering or mechanical, I can't remember which one it was. Anyway, he said his very first, he said the classes were only taught in Hebrew. So the very first thing he had to do was he had to learn Hebrew when he moved to Israel. And so he took a crash course and learned, he said he became completely fluent in 3 months. And I'm thinking, that's amazing. But full immersion, and you're forced to, you pretty much out of a need, you kind of would develop that capability, I would imagine, right?
1,000%. And that's what we're saying here. We can bring, listen, Baruch Hashem, we are all so fortunate today, William, because back in the day, 30, 40 years ago, I would make cassette tapes from Israel. I would record them, and I'd listen to them in my car over and over and over again. Today, all I got to do is, press a button right here, and I've got so many different options. I can go into YouTube and I find things there from some of the albums I learned from famous children's albums from Israel, Keves HaShisha Asar, The 16th Lamb, by Yonatan Geffen, and Danny Sanderson's music and others. And it's available there in various, sometimes animated formats. I teach them to my students today. That's the songs I learned in university that were so meaningful. And today you just press a button and it's there. Now you mentioned, then I want to go on to the next thing here. Mm-hmm. This is your next English Hebrew dictionary purchase. I promise everybody. You got to get this. I have it right here in front of me. You can see it. I'm holding it up. I got it recently. It's published in Israel. The lady who did it, her name is Claire Peretz, I think is her last name. And Claire moved to Israel about 8 years ago, and she didn't speak any Hebrew. And today she's actually publishing this dictionary, English Hebrew by subject. It's a topical dictionary for learning and reference. There are 41 different major topics in here, categories. Some of them have subcategories to them. 10,000 words in here, but more, and all of them, you see the disc?
Yep.
So everything here is organized beautifully in English, Hebrew, bilingual MP3 files, so you can download them, carry them in your phone or whatever your listening device you like to utilize. This is a fabulous resource, and it's intended for beginners and for intermediate and advanced students. I love this. I used to work in a kibbutz kitchen. I really could have used this very well back in the day to do that. So you can go and visit it at this website I put here, which is ingheb, the first three letters of English and Hebrew.com. I suggest you spend a little time. You can actually go there, register, and they will send you some free pages so you can see kind of what it's like.
Nice.
If you happen to send Claire a letter, tell her a note or something, tell her that Gavriel sent you. We've been corresponding back and forth. I did a review on this dictionary in one of the local papers recently. It was very, very helpful. Now, in order to really boost your listening and to really enhance your retention, I would say, if you can't live in a total immersion environment, then one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself is for vocabulary, for a passive approach to grammar, and for longer-term retention is to learn Hebrew through music.
Nice.
Every one of us, right? Every one of us can go right now, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We learned it decades ago, right? But it's still with us, and all kinds of other songs. I'm still trying to figure out, by the way, Rub-a-dub-dub, 3 Men in a Tub. What's that about? You're baking blackbirds in a pie. What kind of animal cruelty is this? Call PETA. It's like
That's funny.
Anyway, as Rabbi Singer would say, I digress. So we want to augment what we're doing in this particular this particular Hebrew language magazine that we're doing, and from time to time drop in a song that you can then go back and listen to and watch and hear and absorb, whether you're a beginner and you're just picking up a few words here and there through phrases, whether you're more at an intermediate level and you're trying to tackle things that are a little more complex and challenge yourself, or people that are more an advanced level and you just want some enrichment through expanding your consciousness and awareness of different songs. So I have queued up here through you, William, a song that is called Birkat Hashanim. I'm going to put the words up here, but really they're going to come up on the screen. This is right out of the what's known as Shmona Esrei, the 18 benediction. There's actually 9, the heart of Jewish prayer from the Siddur, which is davened or prayed 3 times a day. So one of those sections is called Birkat Hashanim, the blessing of the years, and this there are different what's known as nusachim. A nusach is like a one translation of it would be formula. There's nusach Sfard, nusach Edot Mizrach, nusach Ari, which is the siddur that's used in Chabad. There's nusach Ashkenaz. So different Jewish communities have prayer books that differ slightly, siddurim that differ slightly. So this is from the Edot Mizrach, which is for the Jewish communities of like North Africa and the Middle East. So that's they tend to be have a little bit more vocabulary to them, a little more. So they're a little longer than say the Ashkenazi version. And this is a beautiful song. This is a beautiful prayer. You'll see the words. You'll be able to hear them, sung by a well-known Israeli singer. He's a good friend of a good friend of mine locally here. I've met Gad Elbaz recently, and so this is about a 30-second lead-in, so you can cue it to get going, and you'll see the words come up on the screen, and I'll come back to you in about 3 minutes after this song.
Sounds good. Okay, here we go. So about 30 seconds in, go ahead and skip up. Okay, here we go.
השנה הזאת ואת כל מיני תבואתה לטובה ברך עלינו השם אלוקינו את השנה הזאת ואת כל מיני תבואתה לטובה שלום חוס ורחם עליה ועל כל תבואתה ופאותיה ברכה בגשמי רצון ברכה ודבר תהי אחי
And we're back.
That was cool. That was cool. I love watching the English with the Hebrew. All of it together is actually quite nice. It's pretty cool.
I have several of those that I've queued up for future editions of this Hebrew language learning magazine, so that we can provide those. If we have any teachers out there, by the way, whether you're in a congregation somewhere or in a school, I find these oftentimes on YouTube, but everybody knows that YouTube has a lot of what we call in Yiddish schmutz, a lot of garbage around it. So I use a website called viewpure.com, viewpure.com, and I take the link from YouTube and I put it into ViewPure, and it generates a different URL that brings in just the content that I want to see, and it pretty much eliminates the ads and all the other surrounding things that happen from that. So it only works with YouTube videos, but most of the content that I pull from happens to come from that source. This is a way of filtering out the schmutz, as we called it. So,
nice.
By the way, one of the things I wanted to point out to everyone looking at the screen here, I mean, it looks like a lot of text here, and indeed it is. But for those of you that are just maybe just learning Hebrew, or maybe those of you that are more at the intermediate level, I wanted to ask you a question. It says, Baruch Aleinu Hashem Elokeinu, et hashana hazot, ve'et kol minei tvuata, letova, and we go on here, v'ten tal umatar. Now, here we have v'ten tal, give, do, and rain. And notice here we have v, and here we have u. Now it's the same letter, vav,
right.
But here it's pronounced v, and over here it's pronounced u.
And they both
and
mean
it
the
comes,
same
it
thing,
comes up,
right?
Right, it comes up, it means the same thing. It means and, but sometimes it's pronounced v, sometimes it's pronounced v, sometimes it's pronounced va, sometimes it's pronounced u.
Right.
I just want to focus on when does it come up as u, and it's a very simple little way that you can remember it. Now notice here, we have an u here, we have one over here, we have one over here. What do you see that's in common with the ones I just showed you? Here, and here, and here.
The letter mem.
Yes. So a vav that means and coming in front of a mem is always pronounced as u as opposed to v.
So that's the only time you'll see that?
No. You'll see it.
Darn. I was hoping it was easy.
No, it is easy. There's two major categories in which this happens. So, and when you bump into it, I have an easy way for you to remember. In fact, I just told you the cue right there, the clue.
Okay.
When you bump into it. When the letter Vav, and maybe we'll do a slide on this, but it's easy to remember. When the letter Vav, meaning and, stands in front of a bait, another Vav, a mem, or the letter Pei, which in English that would be the sound of the word bump. In Hebrew it would be bait, Vav, mem, or Pei. Then it changes to u.
Bump. Okay, that's good. It's kind of like an acronym for like Beget Kepet.
Yes,
right.
Like exactly right.
Nice.
There are some other cases, and we have a case of it right down here. If you see here, we have the word nidava. And nidava, you notice what's under this consonant is the two dots that's known as a shva.
Right.
Okay, so if we have a word that in the vowel pointing, you can see that it's a consonant and underneath it there's two dots, then whatever that letter happens to be, as long as it's not like one of the what's called gutturals, like an ah or something like that, an aleph or an ein, then it's going to be also u in that case. That's the second category. That takes a little more looking. But for right now, let's just focus on the fact that that's bump. And so at least when you see it, let's focus on the passive side. When you see it passively, now you know why it's that way. Okay, so when you bump into it, you now have a framework for why it's that way.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Now, just really quickly, I wanted to recommend to our viewers some other places online that you can kind of sort out through free material. Sometimes there's a subscription if you want to go up to that level. There's a wonderful one down here on YouTube at Hebrew Pod 101. Tons of free content, both at the absolute beginner level. If you're just trying to learn the alphabet and the vowels and how to pronounce words, they have content for you there. If you want to go from then to beginner and intermediate and more advanced, they have various graduated resources there for you. And these others that I mentioned now, ulpanor.com happens to produce the curriculum that I use in the high school where we are. They also offer online learning, as does eTeacher Hebrew down here. With eTeacherHebrew.com, you can actually join a class online, and you might have a student on, and you see each other on the screen. There might be 4 or 5 of you with a teacher from Israel, and you might have somebody from France and somebody from Canada and somebody from Australia, somebody from the US, somebody from Mexico, all over, and you schedule the class and pay your tuition, and it's just like you have a virtual class.
Nice.
It's not free, but it's reasonable, and it's well worth doing. So you can check out these particular resources and go from there. As one of the biggest core components in learning Hebrew, I would have to say, after you get past the orthography, after you figure out how do I read this, how do I say it, is learning to crack the code on the Hebrew verbs, because they work very differently than, let's say, a Western orientation to verbs, where we conjugate the things the way we do. And I just used one of those meta language terms, conjugate. Here are 2 places that you can go to. One is called hebrew-verb.co.il, and the other is called doitinhebrew.com, which both of them give you, and I'll give you a side-by-side comparison of what you'll find. At hebrew-verb.co.il, what you'll see on the left is what comes up there. You can, they'll give you a word, and you can see it in its, I have to put on my glasses now to actually see this. So
I'm going to see if I can zoom in on there too while you're doing
All right. So on the first column here on the right, you'll have the verbs represented in the present, then in the past, and then the future. Okay, so when you go to so that's hebrew-verbs.co.il. From doitinhebrew.com, you'll find they have actually something called a Verb Conjugator that will generate the verbs for you. And if you're familiar with the way that Hebrew operates in constructing verbs through the 7 what are known as binyanim, the 7 different types of action is what I call it. And I have a simple way, I think, of figuring all that out and hanging on to it. Then the Verb Conjugator will give this to you in a way that's pretty easy to see. And so you'll give you here the shorish, the root. It'll give you what category of action it's in. This one's called pa'al, which is a simple action. And then you can see how the patterns work out. So if you're already at the level of being able to appreciate a little bit about how they work and you want to have a quick and handy way to reference that, then these 2 sites are available. There's a limited amount available at Do It in Hebrew. You can subscribe to it for like $5 a month, which I do. It's very useful. I use it for school all the time. So that's it. If you want to request a PDF version of this content which you saw today, then you are welcome to send me an email at gavrielsanders@gmail.com. I'm happy to correspond with you. If you have comments, suggestions about the programming that we're doing here, the beautiful part of this is it's your interactive magazine. Now, you might be saying, well, gee, I thought you'd be teaching a lot of Hebrew. Not my job. You are at your particular level, and my job is to guide you, because that's really what I am, madrich l'safa ha'ivrit. I'm a guide to the Hebrew language, and to guide you to resources that you can tap into and grow from where you are. That way I can speak to the broadest number of people and do, I think, the greatest amount of good by giving you exposure to various resources like this one we said right here, which was one definitely everybody should get and have. And along the way, we'll do some fun things. I plan to do some learning with you of some songs, some really excellent Hebrew kids songs that I've spoken to kids in Israel for 40 years, really 30, 40 years. Those will be a lot of fun. We'll view those together.
Nice.
I will prepare also some what are known as Quizlet vocabulary lists. Some of them I already have, where you can create your own flashcards, or I'll have them there for you. They go back and forth, and you can make your own tests, and it's just delightful. We have more than we could ever imagine today. Hayom yesh lanu kol kach harbe mekorot, אנחנו לא יודעים מה לעשות איתם. We have so many different sources, we don't know what to do with them. So
that's nice.
טוב, ברוך השם שאנחנו היינו ביחד היום, אני מקווה שהכל בסדר אצלכם, שכל אחד מתפקד בחיים בקו הבריאות, ואז עד התוכנית הבאה, אז אנחנו נתראה. So I hope everybody's doing well and is enjoying good health, and that we'll look forward to another program soon. Do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, question for you. Rosetta Stone, for someone who's wanting to learn biblical Hebrew, is Rosetta Stone a good option for them? Because I noticed they, during it's because we have Rosetta Stone, and the kids use it like every day. But I'm not sure how much it's helping them with biblical Hebrew, because it's more of just modern Hebrew or contemporary, what they're speaking now. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I actually wrote about this not too long ago in one of my columns, and I said that now Rosetta Stone has really given itself a makeover in recent years, as has Berlitz. They've tried to do the same, but in all those cases, they don't give you enough interactivity. They're kind of mechanical programs. It's kind of a book in online, so to speak. My recommendation, and it's just that, a recommendation to anyone and everyone, is that if you can afford it, and my maxim is what's good isn't cheap and what's cheap isn't good.
Right.
Masha tov lo zol, masha zol lo tov. Then tie into one of these like ehebrew.com, eHebrew teacher, or Ulpan Or that I mentioned to you a moment ago. Let me over here, right there. Both of these have programs that will teach you biblical Hebrew, but in real time. You can have a teacher. Now, I will make a categorical statement that, only because I'm opinionated, I think I'm right. The best way to learn biblical Hebrew is to master as much as you can in modern Hebrew, because the gap between modern Hebrew and biblical Hebrew is much narrower than the gap between, let's say, modern English and Chaucerian English, which goes back to the 13th century. It's the grammar is pretty much the same. The verbs work pretty much the same. Much of the vocabulary is the same. There are a few peculiarities that are easy to pick up if you know modern Hebrew. If you're only focusing on biblical Hebrew, then you're really mostly involved in a passive exercise of learning to read. It's kind of one-dimensional. And my feeling is that the more dimensions you add to your learning, the more you're going to retain, appreciate, and value. So if you're going to break your brain, as we say in Hebrew, ani shivarti et hashinayim sheli, I broke my teeth learning this language, then go ahead and go holistically for it, because you won't be wasting any time. You will be boosting your retention. You will be widening your understanding and deepening your vocabulary. And then it's a matter of just adding certain things. And then when you start reading texts, biblical texts, they'll make much greater sense much faster if they have something relevant that you've already mastered to hold on to. And that's, if I could go back and do it, well, that is kind of how I did it. I studied modern Hebrew. I learned in Israel. I was in 4 different kibbutzim, and then I went to I took Hebrew reading courses from one of the professors at Fuller Seminary in Los Angeles many years ago, Dr. Gabeline. And I used to go to his house because I was the only student in the class, and we would sit and we would read through different biblical texts. But I was so surprised how much I understood because I had such a solid foundation in modern Hebrew. So I gave you a long answer to a short question, and I'll give you now the short version. Learn modern Hebrew, then go for biblical Hebrew. You will go further, faster, cheaper.
Gotcha. Well, that sure sounds like some wonderful sound advice, my dear friend. Such a pleasure having you back on again. Look forward to our next visit. Our goal will be every week. The time, however, may fluctuate depending on how the other scheduled broadcast goes. So we'll just call this our floating magazine for the time. So, all right. Well, it's been great. Look forward to seeing you all next time. Shalom, my friend. Shavua Tov.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה.